couple trickling in on Zoom, but I think our in-person crowd looks like our normal, our usuals. So we can get started. Really quickly, we're going to go around and just do introductions. The camera and the microphone are this little camera right here. This venue isn't set up with like built-in cameras. So we'll go around the room, and this is a conference camera, so it can pick up from the farthest seats if you just speak loudly. I'll go first. So I'm Heidi Ortloff. I am the coordinator for the Ventura River Watershed Council, and I work for the Ventura County Resource Conservation District as the Outreach and Education Coordinator.
I'm Lauren. I help coordinate the Watershed Council, and I also work at the Resource Conservation District.
And we'll go this side.
I'm Bruce Kobler, Director with the Ventura River Water District.
Thank you, Bruce.
Morning, everybody. Jody Schweitzer, Water Program Director at the Farm Bureau.
Thank you, Jody.
Rhett Walker, Grants Manager, Ojai Valley Land Conservancy.
Thank you, Rhett. Gentleman in the back.
Josh Noble, stakeholder.
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 Stakeholder, and then back table over there. City of Ventura. State Parks Planner. State Parks Planner.
Charlie Davidson, State Parks Natural Resources.
State Parks Natural Resources.
Angie Heald, member of the public.
Member of the public.
Callie Lamont, Assistant Director at the Valley Fire Safety Council.
Yay. Nice to see you again, Callie. And then you guys right up there, Laura and Lynn.
Lynn Rodriguez. Laura Schellenberger, also working on the watershed project.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to give the people over Zoom a chance to unmute and introduce themselves. I'm going to just work down the list I see. So be ready to unmute if you can. Tom. Are you ready, Tom? Not ready. Brian Bondi.
Good morning, Brian Bondi, Executive Director, Upper Ventura River Groundwater Agency.
Thank you, Brian. Mary.
Mary Bergen, Casitas Municipal Water District.
Thanks for joining us, Mary. Dane St. George.
Hi, Dane St. George, Cal Fish and Wildlife, working on the Matilahat Dam project with the county.
Thank you. Elizabeth Burns.
Elizabeth Burns with the Southern Steelhead Coalition.
Nice to see you. Katie McShirley.
Hi, Katie McShirley, Santa Barbara County Water Agency.
Leslie.
Is that me? Leslie Purcell. I'm with OCR Club, a few other organizations, we all in Native Plant Society. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. OVLC.
Hi, this is.
There you are.
There I am. Hi. Hi, Heidi. Hi, Lauren. I'm Vivon Sedgwick, and I am the Restoration Program Director at the Ojai Valley Land Conservancy.
Thanks for joining us. Peter Schellenberger.
City of Ventura Public Works, Stormwater Quality. Thank you.
Thank you. Roxy. Maybe she's away right now. Alma.
Hi, Alma Quezada, General Manager for Ventura River Water District.
Thank you. And Tom Hicks, are you ready?
Yep. Morning, Tom Hicks, Water Attorney of Council to the Ventura County RCD on the Ventura River In-Stream Flow Project and working for other landowners in the valley.
Thank you. Anyone who did not get to speak who wants to introduce themselves? No. I don't want to put Michelle on the spot. Okay. If you do want to introduce yourself or provide any updates for your organization, you can. Now's your time if you want to share anything, or you can put it in the chat. Just let us know. I'll give you guys a minute.
I'll add something for people in the room. We have a sign-in sheet and we're gonna try and be better about recording our participants at these meetings. So if you can pass the sign-in sheet around the room and then hand it to me when you're done. Thank you.
Okay, any other updates from anyone in the audience? Anything they want to share with the group? Okay, cool. All right, so we can get started with our presentations. Today, we're going to have a presentation on the Watershed Resilience Project. Lynn Rodriguez and some other team members, myself included, will be talking on that. And then after our break, we're going to have an update from California State Parks. So let me, oh, I need to share my screen in Zoom. Give me 1 second. Share the right window. All right, so I'm going to do the first couple slides before I hand it over to Lynn. This is going to be an update on the Watershed Resilience Pilot Program that we've presented on at the past few watershed meetings. If you're unfamiliar with it, it's a pilot program that was granted to VCRCD to do some watershed network development and climate planning in the Ventura River watershed. And we just want to give you guys some updates. So the first update that I'll be providing is on our communication and outreach plan. We are working on, and I'll be sharing the website with you guys right now, but our goal is we're going to start 2025 is going to be a big year for us in terms of sharing some of our messaging about the project, trying to get public input on the project, as well as other interested stakeholders. And we have developed, let me exit out of this really quick and I can share with you guys the website we've developed. This will be a website that we direct the public to if they have questions about what is this project or want to know where we are at with the project. So our first thing, we go over what the project is about and what it's going to contain. We have project contacts who are going to be Laura and Lynn over here, their contact information. And then we have a little bit of information on why this type of project is important, this climate resiliency, and why we're focusing on like a watershed and how that fits in with DWR and like their state water plan. Then we have a little bit of information about the Ventura watershed. Our goal is that people who go here, if they want to be involved, track the project, they're going to see that the Watershed Council is a major part of this project. There's a link right on the website for them to subscribe. So hopefully anyone who we capture their interest as we talk about this project, they will become a subscriber of the Watershed Council, and which is pretty cool because a lot of, not a lot, but we have a good amount of people. I'd probably say when I check our statistics every other month, we probably get like at least 20 people who view our watershed meetings on YouTube afterwards. So this is a way for, even if they can't come to our meetings, for them to still stay engaged with the Watershed Council. And then this is the part that gets into the more nitty gritty of what each task of the watershed encompasses. And so right now it's mostly the grant language and like the agreement in there. But as we develop more things as a group and with other people on our team, we will be plugging this in so that if anyone's wondering like what have we done and you know what still needs to be done and what's the plan, they can go here and kind of hopefully answer some of their questions. And then if they have more questions, they can to Laura or Lynn with those additional remarks. So back. So from that, we will be using some of that messaging to do outreach materials like brochures and things like that. This is one of the things that we're going to be relying on our partners to help us kind of get the word out. So if you are a partner that has a lot of events, we would appreciate it if you put a brochure holder out for some of our stuff. We're also going to be trying to get the word out for some of our public messaging through social media. And this is something I kind of want to get everyone's input on. My social media account we can use is like the VCRCD social media account, but I don't know if we're interested in having like a Ventura River Watershed Council Instagram account or from another social media platform. I kind of wanted to just take feedback on that right now. If anyone, I would hate to start an Instagram account that competes with someone else's, if there's someone else already covering that kind of stuff. But I just wanted to put that out there if anyone has any opinions on that, one way or the other.
In the room, I mean, we have someone raising their hand, so maybe we can start there.
Yeah.
Okay, Elizabeth, you can unmute yourself. You're ready.
Okay, hi. So I would say, as somebody who runs I run like at least 3 Instagram accounts, one for the coalition and for other things that I do on the side. I would say it is a lot to run more, and building your community from the ground up, it can be a little difficult. So it might be nice to just use because this is a project under the RCD, right?
Yeah, we're the lead agency.
So I say make it easier yourself and gain more followers by using the account that's already proactive. It's also something that's under, and honestly, it shows something that the VCRCD is doing, right? That is something that you guys are doing, and you're the project leaders of it. So I would advise to just use your own account for it that you have already. Because 1, lots of followers get out to more people, and 2, because it shows what you guys are doing as an agency already, which is big kudos to you. And also, I'd love some flyers or brochures. The coalition is all about promoting what other people and organizations and groups are doing in the area.
Yeah, and you do a lot, Elizabeth. I know you do a lot of outreach. So I appreciate that. Michelle, do you have an input?
Yeah, I think the one thing would be to, if you were to nestle it under an existing organization platform, I think what would be important is to kind of like visually make it separate, so it's easy for folks, because this is kind of its own entity that runs with a lot of other collaborators and partners, that you have something that'll visually set it apart from the rest of your content. So people, as they're going through Instagram or Facebook, they can figure out like what is for this entity specifically. But yeah, I also wrote in the comment, I also see that it makes sense to have its own account, but that's me having like a platform where I have access to multiple accounts, and then they all publish. Like I go to this one social media tool to publish across 3 or 4 different platforms for 3 or 4 different accounts at once. So unless we have something like that, what Elizabeth says makes sense, unless we have a tool that's not at our disposal like that. So yeah, I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you. Vivon?
Yeah, I agree with everything that was just said. And I was thinking, one way to because our CD has a ton of really great programs, and I think you guys do a good job of this already. Especially with, I'm thinking, I want to say like the Monarch Regional Advisory Committee, like you guys do a good job of kind of like branding the different programs, if that makes sense. So I personally don't find it confusing. And I think maybe that's, if anything, if anyone does find that confusing or something like that, maybe it's a question of just like a consistent way of like putting the logo of that program always in the right bottom corner, and maybe there's like a different color band at the bottom. Like OVLC, we do that for like Native Plant Month posts. That just popped into my head to kind of differentiate them from all the other things we were doing. So they kind of had like a different color band at the bottom of the post, and that seems to do just fine in terms of kind of differentiating a certain program that you're promoting.
Yeah. Some good thoughts. I like the comments on branding. Yeah, Laura.
I just want to, been someone who's worked on social media campaigns and with consultants that are much more informed on this. I think you could go either way, but I totally agree that it's a challenge that if something is to not be managed in the future, it's frustrating to put in that work and then have it just kind of fall apart later because there's not, the project is not, active at the moment, or so I guess if you would make one, it would be for the council specifically, but only if you were to keep just posting meetings. But if you don't have the time to do further engagement beyond that on a regular basis, then I don't think it's worth it to develop that following just to have them kind of not be as engaged, and it's hard to get through the noise in social media. It's almost impossible unless you're doing a lot of, you have a following already, you're doing paid posts. So I would agree. And then, branding I think is really important. One thing we could do too is put together for all of their partners and members of the Watershed Council is put together a media package to share out at different points, especially during this project, the Watershed Resilience Project, and ask for kind of call it like a shared values partnership, or to do some additional like cross posting of different things. So we could work on that and at times share that out.
Sounds good. Does anyone else have any?
Oh, and I was gonna say, I don't know if RCD's social media already has a link tree on
We do, yeah.
Okay, I would add then the Watershed Resilience page once we're at a certain point to that.
Okay. Sounds good.
And as a reminder, it's a page, it is a page on the RCD's website. It is not its own website.
Yeah.
So it's under their domain.
Thank you. Other things we're looking at is utilizing the Watershed Council's newsletter. Our newsletter goes out to almost 500 people. So, and has been collecting followers for several years now. So it's pretty good engagement. I normally get some people from the public asking me follow-up questions on that. We're hoping to have community meetings to get their input on the plan as it gets developed, and hopefully as an addition to that, maybe hold some like webinars just for people who have a hard time going to in-person things. There is a virtual way for them to share their opinions. This one I kind of already talked about, but just your partner help. If we put out a call out to our subscribers to like help encourage other people to join our mailing list. We're going to be emailing identified representatives. If you think of someone who you think really should be involved in giving input on this project and you haven't heard us mention them before, they're not really familiar with the council, please let us know. We can reach out to them. And then another big part of our program is trying to reach out to communities who might have felt excluded in the past or might have difficulty coming to these meetings. And that kind of leads us to another part of our communication plan is the state, the DWR pilot program. It calls for us to, develop our watershed network, which thankfully we have a really well-developed watershed network, and just evaluate it for equitable decision-making. So we will be examining the rules and procedures to address equity and make recommendations on what we could do to improve that. The good thing is our council already has a really strong charter, and we have taken efforts to kind of have balancing, like a good balance of interests and priorities. So it probably, when we go through it, just to see who could be invited, who maybe hasn't been yet or hasn't felt comfortable yet coming. But we want to do this because as part of our deliverables to DWR, we need to submit like what our charter looks like and what our governance structure looks like. And that's going to go into the final plan. That will be part of the work that we need to do in this next year. And then our upcoming timeline, we're looking just to do like a short little zoom in on the next few months. January through April, we're hoping to get the word out to the public about this at 2 to 3 events. So if you know of an event happening, I know there's the Walk in the Watershed event happening sometime in April, but if you know of other events happening that your organization's doing or going to, one of my partner asked for you guys to please let us know so we can go there and get the word out. We want to hold a webinar for the public, especially Lynn's going to be talking about creating like some vision statements and goals. As we do that, we might want to get some public engagement. We're going to be drafting some sections for the plan, mostly dealing with what the watershed network looks like and what our engagement has been like, and a draft hopefully will be going out sometime in spring. And then reviewing our charter, as I mentioned on the previous slide, early next year, and refining our watershed vision, goals, and problem statements that Lynn will elaborate later in this presentation. That's for the communication plan. Does anyone have any questions about that before we go on? Lynn can elaborate more. Okay.
Use this next slide. Yeah. Okay, if I just sit.
Yeah, I can move the camera towards you. I get it.
But right here too. So as part of our watershed network assessment and development task, we have been meeting with the key partners in the watershed. We will continue to have conversations and possibly some additional meetings, but we've gone through the kind of priority list for the moment on those. And part of that has been to, initially it was also introducing this project, which we've had now council meetings, so that hasn't been as necessary, but identifying existing resources and plans and studies that you all have been involved in, we're leading, that can inform the watershed resilience plan, exploring opportunities to collaborate and build off of what has already been done in the watershed, and making sure we're aware of current projects and where they're at, so we can incorporate that as needed, and gather input also on your kind of key climate concerns and risks and some impacts. And that's also just to kind of help inform our climate vulnerability assessment that will be launching very soon as we onboard additional consultants, our technical consultants, to work on that. So that's giving them a starting point as well, and what to focus on, and kind of doing to work on a systems wide analysis of the climate concerns. So that engagement's been crucial for understanding the watershed's current state and vulnerabilities. And we just want to thank you for those that we've met with and for your input to inform the climate vulnerability assessment. We've created a summary table of key concerns and climate threats. It's being reviewed right now by the agencies that participated in those meetings, as well as some of the more detailed notes, which are really just going to be mostly internal and for handing off, working with our consultants and referring back to. So this is not a deliverable, this table, and it is also not finalized, which is why it is quite small to read and is being reviewed. And one thing though, next slide, that I wanted to kind of share was reoccurring climate concerns across the partners. So concerns, overlapping concerns, things we heard frequently. And these are climate concerns, threats from climate change. So drought and water supply reliability by far was one of the biggest concerns, along with flooding and erosion. Those two we heard the most frequently. Of course, they have different kind of flavors and impacts depending on who we're talking to, but prolonged drought affecting water availability for supply ecosystems and also agriculture in the watershed. And then flooding and erosion, a lot of partners identified flooding and erosion as a critical threat to water infrastructure. Again, we're focusing on water sector. So water infrastructure, as well as also recreation space along the river and preserves and habitat, wiping that out. And of course, it's also exacerbated by, also we have in here about Orundo, both exacerbating wildfire risk and some of that flooding erosion. There's compounding effects there. But also there was concern about future changes following Matilah Dam removal. That's just a concern that comes up. And then other notable concerns that we've heard a few times were about wildfire threats compounded by invasive species, like I said, Orundo. And then of course that exacerbating flooding and erosion, and also just in general being a risk to water infrastructure, habitats, and community safety. And then extreme heat as well, and how much we will be impacted by that watershed in the future, and how that can affect both vulnerable communities as well as also water operation workforce. So workforce safety as well for water sector. Some shared challenges. We also heard frequently about financial barriers, difficulty aligning regulatory requirements with funding opportunities, a lot of kind of desire to be more proactive with climate resiliency, but challenges in receiving and accessing funding that is more proactive and less, and right now a lot of agencies feel that they're a little more stuck in the reactive stage of being able to access funding, especially when it comes to accessing funding. So looking for what those barriers are to accessing the climate resiliency funding for more proactive implementation of adaptation strategies. And what those barriers are, which we know there are many. Also, there's a desire for more collaboration when it comes to particular public engagement and building community awareness of climate risks and resilience efforts in watershed, and stronger engagement with tribes. One thing also not on here that I think we would like to add is also another constraint that is of concern is we've heard it's about regulatory mandates for flows in stream flows and how that will exacerbate water supply issues. Although it is not a climate threat, it's a additional constraint and challenge that we will have to look at and examine, and when the timing of receiving that information of what the kind of final stream flow requirements are going to be and what the impact of all of that is we're hoping that that can be aligned and integrated as best as possible into this plan, but we are definitely aware of that, and we will be working with our consultants to make sure that, of course, this plan is adaptive and that it will acknowledge that at whatever state that process is in, as well as adjudication process is another kind of wrinkle in all of this. So just want to share this with you and open it up for any kind of feedback. I know there's so much more you could say about all of this, but how does this feel? Does this feel accurate to the watershed?
Yeah, I just wanted to add something to your last point about constraints that might seem like they're outside of the purpose of this pilot. However, in the meetings that we've had, and I'd say at least probably half of them, some sort of aspect of regulatory challenge has come out and come up, and along with financial constraints. How do we fund these things? It's great to talk about resilience, but where are we going to get the money to do it? And part of the value of this pilot is that we have the state as our partner, and working with DWR and other state agencies that I hope we will be working with more closely. We need to talk about those constraints, because we don't want more pie in the sky. We want, realism. And so the constraints piece is going to be an important part. I expect that will be in the plan. We can do that if we want. It's not required, but to talk about constraints, probably in the implementation chapter.
Yeah.
So it's an acknowledgement and making sure the state understands we don't have so much control. And Michelle is on the line, and how are our legislators going to be able to maybe respond with some of the aspects of regulatory, the regulations that affect us come from legislation, and some of them are state agency policy, but we really want to emphasize that we can only do so much, and that we need the state's cooperation and understanding about all of these things, and the public. So we'll be engaging the public around a lot of that as well.
Yeah. Why we can't just go in and change everything in the river bed.
Will the plan recommend actions?
Yes.
If it does, is there any consideration to how an equitable apportionment of cost would be made? I mean, a discussion with the community about how do you fund some of the stuff that needs to be done? I think that would be valuable to get to the line.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that is, it might be specific to like a smaller portion of the projects and not overall, but I think on priority projects that are identified as significant for risk reduction, that would be appropriate for us to have that be part of the document, the conversation.
The funding question is, this comes up all the time in just many different sectors of water is, who pays, how much is it going to cost? What are the regulatory mandate is that you shall, like stormwater permit. That's a good example of something with a high price tag. And how's that funded? And we watched LA County go through that, and they've come up with Measure W, which is funding their water. We have to look for mechanisms in the communities to help fund things, but also, and if you get a parcel tax or some sort of local bond that would, or local measure that would fund, anything, not just clean water, but also water supply enhancement. We're very dependent on grants, and we can't necessarily continue to do that. But the public and the rate setting process are so broad and so challenging, especially for low income communities. We have to find a way to put adequate value on making those changes, building those projects, doing those programs, and then how they're financed. And that's a problem all over California. It's not unique to us, but it's an important consideration when we do our implementation, our strategy, planning, and our implementation plan is the funding piece.
And the room, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, I'm new in my position at July, so maybe just a system of that, but I'm actually not super familiar with this project, and I don't know if we've been reached out to yet. So again, this is more on my side of me personally not knowing about this project in particular, so that might be the system of this, but this is something that state parks would really like to have a voice in. I think we can help spur some of those discussions as well. And just personally, I come from LA County Stormwater Watershed Consultants. So I'm familiar with somewhat how these groups work and some of the constraints. And so now being in state parks, it's obviously different, but I think we would love to be in these discussions as well. It will help as well. So yeah, I'm fairly new, and being in the natural resources now, we actually have that.
Do you mind introducing yourself again, then?
Sure, my name is Charlie or Charles Davidson. So I'm the natural resources senior environmental scientist for Channel. So fairly new. So this is definitely a system of my predecessor and kind of that transition. But excited to hear about this. I always like watershed projects. And state parks will also watersheds and working closer. So
we'll be happy to bring you up to speed. We have talked about this project at previous meetings, so we didn't want to go over it all again.
No worries.
Yeah.
That's what I meant. It might just be me, and I maybe misunderstand. Sorry about that.
We would love to engage more with state parks. That has
Great.
been, I think,
that's been a desire, I would say, among the Ventura Watershed Council as well as Santa Clara River Watershed Committee, which I hope you attend their next meeting. Whenever it is, which I'm not aware of the day in February. So I'm just letting you know, there's gonna be, people are gonna be happy to have more state parks involvement.
There's been a lot of people that have been picking up the.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I wanted to add, I mean, just as a, again, we've talked about this in previous meetings and we didn't want to go over it too much, but the partnerships that we're building in this watershed go well beyond the key partners we've been meeting with initially. They're the ones that have the biggest maybe responsibilities and active engagement, with, whether it's a water agency or city, county, the big land conservancies and whatnot. But our partners, I mean, our list of calling partners, not stakeholders, we use the partner word, and that is a huge list. And we've got a whole section for state agencies. So as part of this process, it's taking us a while. You can see we've been building slowly the scaffolding of this project. It's taking, it takes time to do it, but once we get our consultants on board, we'll have more capacity to be out having meetings with maybe some of the sectors, like state agencies, or just with individual sector agencies like state parks. So we view everybody as being a really important part of this and a player, if you will, and we're not going to limit it just to the key players that we put.
Yeah, I've definitely jumped in, obviously, I'm really.
Oh, no, I just wanted to say, give credit where credit is due to Heidi. She's reached out to me. That in the normal stuff of staff over the last couple of years, but definitely some of the work that we've been doing that was really nice. This we happy to share our lessons learned and like
Thank you. Any other comments, thoughts?
Just
On
in the
this.
chat, just as notes to add as challenges, OVLC mentioned that we should add habitat and invasive species as a separate bullet point, and also land use and the viability of ag and orchard production, and then policy constraints to open space, such as the Williamson Act. Those are all the chat has to say.
Yeah, we have a long list of, I appreciate that. We do have a kind of a long list of constraints and challenges and considerations that will, that are reflected also in notes, but I appreciate that. We'll make sure that that also, is emphasized in our notes and in our discussion. Oh, yeah.
It's also important to try to avoid cultural habits. Climate is plants, atmosphere, it's all together, all part of it. I think really stressing interconnection relationships all have. Try not to list fire problems.
Yeah.
It's distance. I believe that mindset is among ourselves. It begins here that whole funders see these relationships, understand. There's different ways, so many ways. We try to do that. Fire safety, take it beyond just hey, chipper days and fuel reduction, but it's a system of all. So I think let's try to avoid silence. Always done, which has never worked. So, 2 bits.
Thank you. Helpful.
Does anybody have the sign-in sheet they can pass me?
It disappeared.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank
Well,
you.
you can. Next slide. Yeah. I don't. Okay. Talk about.
Although it is hard to see without that, like, beautiful view of the mountains, but it's a little bright.
Unfortunately, I can't close the
I
curtain.
know.
Not allowed to.
Not allowed.
Well, thank you, everybody, for your continued engagement in this project. It's emerging. We're excited about the next steps.
When you're gonna stand, can you come a little, I'll move the microphone a little closer to you.
Okay.
Okay.
It's okay. I need to build this.
Yeah, if you're in the audience and you have trouble hearing, let us know, but we'll try to.
Okay, I'll try to speak up. So one of the tasks in the grant, and you may now be familiar with the work plan, there's 12 tasks in the grant, and this one is task 6, which is setting a vision for the watershed. This may sound familiar to all of you who've been engaged in watershed activities over the years. We've set visions and missions in the past for the IRWM plan and for the watershed management plan, and it's an exercise that usually is a precursor to getting work done. You want to make sure that you're all moving in the same direction. So I thought, and we're going to be starting that process early next year, once we have our consultants on board and we get and are able to do some public engagement, which is going to be a fairly intensive effort. So, but I thought we would start with, here's what's the requirement from the state for this grant for setting a vision and why we need to do that and how we will put it together. So talking about specific problems in the watershed, and we've already been getting a lot of that feedback from the partners we've met with so far, and we will be doing some surveys to get to the point of how do we get more input, not just in these meetings or in our individual meetings with entities, but from everybody, is do some surveys, and we're working on some possible questions for that, and then that's something we'll probably turn over to the consultant to get started on. But to come up with some specific statements about the watershed, what are our key things? We've talked about a lot of them already today. Some of the problems that have to do with climate risk and water shortages and other things, but also constraints of funding, regulatory requirements. So we'll be developing those problem statements, and then we need to document them as a guide for developing the watershed management plan or the watershed. So that kind of makes sense. That's standard process. So the technical and policy aspects that come later in this grant are going to feed off of what comes first in the vision statement, visions and problem statements. And, you know, some of the challenges we need to be aware of, be documenting what those challenges are, pitfalls that we come across, develop the vision. So it isn't necessarily a huge task. We've certainly got lots to build on, but that kind of explains what the state's looking for. Next slide. So I thought I would start with just a reminder of what the vision and goals are in the other two documents that have guided our work in the past. And these are pretty standard. I mean, it's not rocket science to come up with a list like this. No.
Is it the right slide?
Pardon me?
Is it the right slide?
Yes, for the IRWM.
My computer is glitching a little bit.
Yeah. No, this is right. So protecting and conserving the water supply portfolio for an increased local water resilience, protecting and improving water quality, protecting people, property, and the environment from adverse flooding impacts, protecting and restoring habitat and ecosystems in watersheds, providing water-related recreation, public access, stewardship, engagement, and educational opportunities, and prepare for and adapt to climate change. So those goals were established in meetings like this back in, actually in the first IRWM process back in 2006, and then the update in 2014. So they're a guiding light. These are touchstones. This is the things you all work on. I mean, all of you were involved probably in a lot of these goals. So I just wanted to remind people that we have that set of existing goals for the IRWM plan. So next slide. Then if you want to look at it in kind of a graphic way, we share these out after the, right? Yeah. The most recent goal setting exercise happened right when the 2019 IRWM plan amendment was being developed. And we had each of the watersheds kind of restate what their key goals were for their watershed. And then we developed this diagram that shows the overlap. And that's in the IRWM plan. But it will also be in the stuff that you can get after the meeting. But you can see a lot of commonality. I mean, we'll talk about it closely, but these are the areas where everybody has agreement. Diversity of supply, stormwater planning, management, capture and reuse, ecosystem restoration, public education, improve drought resilience and climate change adaptation, and removing invasive species. And these are all obviously up at the top of the list of this watershed as well. And then there were a few others that weren't shared by everybody, improving water quality and availability for all, being underserved communities, Matilla dam removal, and increasing water use efficiency. So nothing in there about wildfire.
Did you mention recreation access and conjunctive use also were part of the Ventura?
Oh, sorry. Yeah. So anyway, this is just kind of, I wanted to reflect on past conversations. I'm sure we can come up with some different things or some new things now, but I just wanted to share that. And then the next one is the list of goals in the watershed management plan. Many of you or some of you were involved in that process, developing those goals. That was a long process at the beginning of the development of the plan. And then from that were specific objectives and then campaigns. So you may remember the campaigns that we set up for things like invasive removal, land use, and water quality, which were busy and active for a while, but I think it's been a long time since we've done anything with that, so that we can always revisit that and see how it fits into this current effort. So those goals are similar to the ones from the Iron Demand Plan: sufficient local water supplies, clean water, integrated flood management, healthy ecosystems, access to nature, responsible land and resource management, and coordinated watershed planning. I think that we do all of those things now. I mean, the council really is dedicated to these goals. And so we're ahead. I'll just say that we've been meeting with the other 4 pilots, and I'll just restate if you're interested. Calaveras Watershed, Pajaro Valley Watershed, Russian River Watershed, and the American River Watershed are the other 4 pilots that are going through this process with us. We meet with each other and learn, we learn from each other, which is really helpful. We just had a meeting earlier this week. But we're further along in these things because we have been planning at a watershed scale for a long time. So we have a legacy to build on. We've had good engagement. I think the challenge for us in this watershed is we want to refresh what we've been doing, do things we haven't been doing, figure out what the gaps are. What are we not doing well enough? Who's not at our table as we go around and identify what are our key vulnerabilities and how are we going to address them? And then how do we address those other challenges that have brought up, like lack of funding and concerns about regulation and lack of public understanding? Because a lot of these things have to do with, do people understand if they're being asked to vote on a bond or not come to the city meetings or the water district meetings and fight a rate increase? Those are all things that need to be driven by knowledge. And it's a big job, especially on a large watershed. This watershed is the smallest of the 5 pilots. And so our job is a little bit easier than some of the other watersheds. You can imagine the American River Watershed up in this, that's a huge area. How are you going to get the kind of engagement we're able to get already in this watershed? So our job is a little bit easier, but at the same time, we don't want to rest on our laurels and say, well, we're doing it right. We don't need to do anything else. Clearly, there's a lot of challenges that we're facing that we need to work on together. So, and there are a lot of entities, state agencies and other agencies that we have not yet met with, federal agencies for that matter, Bureau of Reclamation and Forest Service. There's a lot of players in this watershed doing things, regulating things, and then certainly the public interest groups, the environmental groups that are that have concerns and want to see things done differently. So that anyway, there's just a lot of constraints that we're facing, but that's what we'll be talking about. And when we get the public together and we have some public, do some surveying and we do some public engagement where we really get people's input, it needs to be highly interactive and then also informational. Just as a reminder, we've just come off of a long process doing the disadvantaged community involvement grant process, where we did a lot of outreach in the underserved communities. And equity is a big motivator in this pilot to make sure that we don't leave out marginalized communities, tribes. So we built a good starting point, and so now we're like really ready to launch. And once we get the consultants on board, we'll be able to start that. So questions? Hi.
Question. What did your outreach look like to
For this process?
In that grant.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
And that's a good point, because we may want to do some special workshops around subject matters like that. There's been a lot of work done in that grant, and essentially it was a needs assessment, breaking into groups of underserved communities. So Cedar Springs and the Avenue in Ventura were the two communities in this watershed that were identified, that we worked with, and we conducted needs assessments and outreach workshops during COVID. So that was kind of interesting. Fortunately, at the time it wasn't great.
We had some workshops. We also did direct mail to homes that were in those designated areas. We had some interesting materials that were developed for that purpose, and both part of the goal was both to educate people on where their water comes from, about what stormwater is, different like water service providers and sectors, and as it relates to their community, and then also get feedback from them on what they feel are their greatest water needs, whether it's like the cost of their water, clean drink, are they concerned about the quality of their drinking water, things like that. So we did get feedback, we had surveys. We did engage a local community-based organizations to do direct, kind of basically like stand in front of local markets and try to engage with people. They did some direct phone banking as well. It was very expensive. We won't be able to do that intensive of outreach with this project, but we can build off of what was already done, both in incorporating some of the feedback we've already received during the disadvantaged community involvement program, as well as lessons we've learned from that engagement, and looking at other opportunities to kind of build upon that.
And we're just in the process of finalizing the report that describes that and shares. There's a website, watertalkspa.gov. I'm sorry, .org, that has all the stuff we did in the 3 IRWM regions. That includes Greater LA. So this was a funding area grant, not just us. And our watershed was just one piece of our IRWM region. But we did a tribal allyship engagement, so that and worked with tribal representatives. So we did a lot of the things that we need to keep doing, I guess is the point. We need to build on what we learned. We developed some tools for assessing projects based on how well they address the needs as described by the community members and the institutions that serve those communities.
People online are saying they can't hear you
sorry.
super well.
Sorry. So yeah, anyway, there's a lot of resources there, and we'll be building on that. The most recent thing we did was in February of 2022, I think it was. We had a workshop on the Avenue that was our partner, and it was specifically focused on climate change impacts to the community on the Avenue. And we had, I think, about 60 people came to that.
Yeah.
Heidi was there. It was a roll up your sleeves, hands on. What are your biggest concerns? Write on the map. Tell us what you want. And that's also undocumented. There's a summary sheet of that discussion. Things like for the community members, high temperatures, water quality, flooding.
I attended that one, and it was a lot of community input. For Spanish speakers, they had a Spanish speaking moderator, and then for English speakers, there was a English speaking monitor, and they had a large map in front of them, and they could mark where they've seen flooding in their neighborhoods, where they notice that there's no shade, where they want water stations. It was very just like in the thick of it, like, what do you notice on your street where you live? What would you like to see at your school? Is there enough shade for students? It's pretty intensive.
And for this process, we'll be also just hoping to get input on like a watershed more scale as well, because this is a watershed scale resiliency project. So just like the vision document, the visioning and goal setting, this project has a slightly different flavor and a different lens that we're looking at watershed resilience and community engagement. So it'll be a slightly different kind of questions and things, but everything in the past we want to use to inform this project as well. We don't want to have to start over from scratch, and we don't want to just, devalue the input that we've already received.
And I think it's also important to do that neighborhood by neighborhood. We found with the meetings that we had, we had one in Santa Paula too, that was a neighborhood flavor to it. And that's what resonate.
Yeah, we talk with the community a lot.
Talking so much at the watershed scale might not work as well with communities that just are things going to get better for them. Well, we're trying to incorporate that.
This is very helpful. So unless there's some big specific question or anything, we can move on. So just another update to share with you is where we're at with the consultant selection. We did put out an request for qualifications. And again, this is Lynn and I are kind of doing project management, but we are obviously limited and don't have the expertise and skills necessary for carrying out a lot of the technical work for this project. And we're working with our CD's team as well. But we put out a request for qualification in September. We received, I think it was 8, possibly 9 responses to that. And some consultants and consultant teams responded to kind of the greater amount, the entire project. We also did have some respond to just specific things like more of the network engagement, outreach, and things like that. So evaluating all of that and making considerations on what works well and efficiency and experience in this watershed was also something we wanted to give credit to in working with the partners. So we've gone through interview and selection and have made more recently a selection to move forward with Rincon Consultants to contract with them, and we'll be onboarding them and developing more detailed scope of work in December. We may also, we're also considering working with an additional consultant team on some of the specifically more of the outreach and engagement with disadvantaged communities and tribes. And that's still being discussed and integrating those. So we expect to be involving them a lot more and working starting in the new year. Any questions on that? Okay, good.
And Rincon Consultants is also doing work in the Pajaro Valley pilot. And they're a little ahead of us. I mean, not in everything, but they're
behind in some ways and ahead.
Yeah. So, and it's mostly similar people on the teams. And so they'll be able to communicate with each other and we'll get a benefit from that efficiency. Yeah. It's just as a reminder, it's $2 million and we have to be we have to be done with the work by the end of February 26th. Don't have a lot of time. The cohort meetings that we go to, everybody's like panicking about how they're going to get all of this work done in such a short amount of time. There's a lot of heavy duty work in the climate risk analysis and data gathering and in the water budget, watershed, all of that. Those components are going to be time consuming. So, but the state is like it's iterative project. You don't have to be done as far as your plan. You can document, do what you can. So.
The proposition 4, I was on the call earlier this week, the State Water Board, they actually consider putting some money technical stormwater fund. So they are working right now on solicitation information. Technical stuff.
So like project development.
Yeah, project plans development, portion of the plan development. Obviously, it will be highly competitive.
Okay. So there aren't any questions. That's our update and project. Yeah.
The grants are mainly from the state, or is it a combination of state or local?
This grant is $2 million from Department of Water Resources. There is no match.
It was a pilot program.
It's a pilot program, yeah.
Maybe this is a good time to mention again that there are other state funded grants and projects going on in the watershed that we want to collaborate with. And one of them in particular is the Watershed Progressive team is working on a turf replacement grant with DWR funding.
I think it's called they're calling it a landscape transformation.
pilot. So if you hear of that, and it's also pilot, and it's also in this watershed, and also DWR, so. And we're just to clarify. Yeah, we will be coordinating.
So the funding that's driving what you guys are doing now is from this, you know.
Yes.
It's state budget money as opposed to coming from a bond measure. This is money they put in the budget a couple of years ago. And they had originally put in about six million to do some pilots first, and then the rest of the money, so it's $10 million for the pilots, and the rest was going to go out for competitive grants down the road, but they had to cut the rest because of the budget shortfall. And so these grants, and thank you for bringing up top four, the bond measure will help. And the state, of course, is DWR is well aware of all these other things going on, and how can they leverage that.
Any other questions? All right, so with that, we gained a little bit of extra time back. We'll meet back here at 10:15. So drink your water. You can go to the bathroom right now, move around to warm up. See you at 10:15. Do some jumping jacks. Do some jumping jacks.
Go outside to stand in the sun.
Yeah.
Okay, we're gonna get started.
Yeah, we're good.
Thank you everyone for coming back from your breaks. We are gonna move on to our next agenda item. It's gonna be from California State Parks. They're gonna be talking about some of the cool stuff they've been doing at Emma Wood. So are you ready?
I'm ready. Well,
You know, you can, if you want to stand, you can. If you want to sit, we can.
post up right on that heater.
Yeah, you can post up, just as long as as long as the conference microphone picks you up, and I will do what I can do to make that as.
That is perfect.
You think this is good?
I think that's fine.
Okay.
Mostly block.
You're just a little thumbnail, so
Okay.
don't worry. All right, let me start your slide. Are you recording?
I'm recording.
Okay.
Okay, so hi everyone. I'm Kate Wilson. I'm the planning chief for state parks in the Channel Coast District. And we were asked to come and kind of share some of the things that we've been doing at Emma Wood, watershed related. So I thought the best place to start would be to do a summary of our Emma Wood invasive species removal project, which was actually funded in partnership with the CAL FIRE grant that we received, and that we finished that up actually in 2023. So now we have like a pretty good perspective where we can talk about lessons learned and how we're going to be able to proceed with project work going forward. And it's kind of a unique, interesting story about how we got into this project to begin with. So I put together this presentation hoping that we could just have more questions instead of like me talking to you guys, because actually it's very unusual for someone in my position to manage a project like this one. It just sort of happened. And I've learned a lot of things along the way, but in the future, it'll be something that Charlie and his team are taking care of. So we're in a transition project, but anyway, this is our project. We can advance the slide. Okay, so we started work in September of 2019, and the grant funding cycle ended in December of 2023. And the idea was we were going to take the 70-acre area of Emma Wood, we call it group camp, but the Main Street portion of that park that's adjacent to the river mouth. And the goal was to remove as much of the invasive species as we could with a strong emphasis on arundo. There had been a lot of attempts within state parks to do arundo management, to do invasive management on that property before, but it's so difficult being the last stakeholder in the watershed, and you're just always receiving everybody's storm debris. And arundo likes to transfer, as we all know. So we decided in this case, it was actually our law enforcement team who was really trying to like meet the deliverables for our DMDL, where they were like, how can we get less trash in the watershed? And then as we were looking at it holistically of like, okay, we have a trash problem we have an invasives problem. What do those things have in common? And so we decided to look at it as like a fire resilience project as opposed to the invasives or the trash component. So we really dug into how flammable the Arundo is, how it acts as a ladder fuel, how it's adjacent to the what's considered to be low-income community along the avenue. So in framing our project in a different way, we suddenly opened up a lot of funding that wasn't previously available to us. So yeah, that's kind of how we got to here. Next slide, please. So there's a bunch of different methods and treatments that we've gone through, but kind of one of the coolest things was as we were going through our permitting hurdles, we had a really long iterative process with CDFW where, as most of you in this room know, getting your permits for work like this is extremely difficult. So we just kept saying no thank you to what being offered and continued to renegotiate the terms of the 1600 agreement that they were offering us. And one of the terms was that they wanted us to create an education program for our own staff and for contractors of what the plants and animals were in the area and what the techniques were for their removal. So we as state parks offered match to the grant, and we hired a dedicated team of forestry aides that were being led by environmental scientists. So these are people that didn't already have like a base knowledge of the plants. So we needed to create like a canned education program of this is this kind of plant, here's how we're treating it. So this is an example of some of the cards that our team made showing like the various different plants, indicating whether or not they're invasive or native, what they look like in their different states over the period of the year, and then what our treatment methods are, because you know some of them you're not putting in the green waste, some of them you're chipping, some of them you can't chip. So we have like our very specific instructions, and then these were they're, I don't know, postcard size. We had them laminated and put on like big rings. And so every work crew would have this like attached to their gear so that they could reference it. And there were other things too, like we had an introductory video. But so that like education portion was really cool. And it's something that we've continued to use and have available for other projects, which is nice. But also, so treatment specifically, we originally were told that we weren't going to be able to do any mechanical work in removing a lot of these plants, which was just not going to be something that worked for us dealing in 70 acres. So we did eventually get permission to do, we kind of did a bulk removal mechanically, and then we went back and our subsequent treatments were the lighter touch, like loppers type treatments. So it made it much more manageable. Also, we're going in and doing herbicide application kind of surgically after the fact. So instead of just like rampantly spraying within the watershed, we would do our initial treatment, then we'd wait for that vigorous regrowth period, and we'd do foliar spray while the plants were really like trying to come back hard. And typically we found that it was like really effective, and we didn't need more than like 2 retreatments in some of these areas. So that was what was the most successful for us. We partnered with the fire department. Ventura County Fire offered their assistance to us with their equipment and their operators, which was huge. So like we did end up paying them, but I'm sure it was a real good deal. But you know, we don't have some of the large equipment that they have, and so we were able to contract with them to come do some serious masticating work for us. Next slide. So I guess I'll talk about the documentation strategies. So the thing that we had going was that we had such a big area and all these different plant species that are all seeding and growing and dormant at different times of the year. It was like a little bit difficult to figure out when are we working on what plant, when should we definitely not work on other plants. Then we had like
bird season to think about when there's high flow in the river. So it became like kind of this really insane matrix of when we were going to be able to get in and do certain things. So we ended up really heavily relying on GIS, which saved the day. I would recommend it 100% to anyone doing this type of work, where we broke down the 70 acres into an arbitrary grid of 1.5 to 3 acre pieces, because we found that's about how much one of our environmental scientists could survey in one outing. So the idea was, so originally CDFW said every day before you work, you have to survey. I said that's not possible, because then you have to go back and write the report. And now all of this time has passed, and then you have to say what happened after you worked. It's like a really heavy duty reporting requirement. So what we got them to agree to in our negotiations was that we would have live ongoing GIS data for them to look at. So we were only working in segmented areas at any given time. So we would send out the environmental scientists to clear the area for a 7-day period. They would generate their report, we would submit it to CDFW, and then all the work that we did would be documented by polygons and points in GIS by our field crew, and then that had a live link that CDFW could look and see what our progress was. And it was like relatively easy to train the field crew how to like document what they were doing. Made just like a daily survey, like where were you? What plant species? Roughly how many acres did you cover? That helped us also with like our requirement for reporting our use of herbicide. So that was nice. And then now we can pull like lots of different data points because all of that is stored forever. We also used it to develop photo points to show like the same place over time, how things were recovering. So before, like in the first year, we hadn't done that. It's really overwhelming. And so once we moved into this model, it was a lot easier to document our progress and show some actual measurable outcomes. We had our team developed this treatment seasons graph, which is what I was talking about in the beginning of like, okay, when do we actually want to target which plants? And then we put this onto a calendar for them so that as they go out into one of their gridded out areas, they know specifically which ones they're looking for and what they're going to treat during that period of time. And then of course, each species has its own special cocktail herbicide wise, so they would know what they were mixing up in any particular time. So in this particular project, we were very, very lucky to get a bunch of different partners involved. I think the trickiest thing that we had to deal with on top of the things that any of these projects have is that we had about 80 homeless encampments on the property before we started, and you can't just displace human beings for the sake of what you want to do. So we really reached out to our partners within the city of Ventura and worked on putting together this multi-agency, essentially task force or collaborative unit, where we held, I think it was 5, forgive me if I'm wrong, it's been years, but I think we had 5 outreach days where we specifically took like backpack medicine folks and mental health professionals and housing placement people like down into these camps to interface with people and help try and get them placement somewhere else. So we weren't just like, be gone, we don't know where, but not here. Really wanted to make sure that we had some sort of a sustainable landing place for folks. So yeah, like there was probably a half a year leading into those 5 different outreach days where our law enforcement team was doing preventative contacts anytime they ran into anyone in an encampment. It was a no cite, no arrest unless it was a different crime, where they were like, hey, by this date, you're going to need to be out. Do you have plans? And then we followed up with like these outreach days, and we had really, really good success. We went from, having the 80 encampments at the beginning to, I think we're still at 0 today. Like, every once in a while someone moves in, we like go introduce ourselves, but the amount of trash that we're able to clear off of this property through this project and the number of people we're able to place was
something that we feel really good about. And just like, I didn't put any of the gory, like, before and after trash pictures. It's not really the point of what we're talking about, but like, it's definitely a pride point for us that like that portion of the watershed is so much cleaner now.
That's amazing how much the effort needs to continue. You know, we started in 2009 and then we did that collaboration with the Ventura Land Trust, right? And we're talking now how much work is still out there. So
Yeah. Absolutely. Next slide, please. So we definitely have had our share of challenges. We're currently still going through some of that. So unplanned disasters, right? Like being a state agency and like having this project managed by someone who's supposed to be doing planning and regulatory compliance. Our attention got diverted a number of times, but the big one was in our first 2 years out there, there was a lot of retaliatory arson fires lit. Folks not being super happy about what we were choosing with where they were living. So we had 26 reported arson fires during our project period. One of which was on Christmas Eve and burnt like half of the project area. But it ended up being a little bit of a blessing in disguise. Yeah, because like, as you know, some of these areas are so dense, you can't get into them to treat. So we were having to like go in and do these like surgical hauling routes of where are we going to clear something wide enough to get something in there to do the work. And then kind of as the fires came through, we were able to say like, hey, look at that sprouting arundo, like get it now. So it was a lot easier to go in there and do stuff. And then also we were able to get into some of these areas that had just like legacy amounts of trash. And we executed a contract after that big fire for, I don't remember how much, it was like a lot of money to the common human being that I am, to have actually we had a hazardous materials specialist company come in and pull out trash that's like propane tanks and things that we didn't feel comfortable having our ordinary seasonal staff doing. So yeah, blessing in disguise. But then, you know, we had 2 huge winters water-wise, and our whole district, which goes from Lompoc to Oxnard, really got hammered. And this crew of forestries that we hired for this project were suddenly pulling them to shovel mud out of Gaviota and clear debris from under bridges. And so I put this little pie chart down here to show like the survey that we have them do every day that says what they're doing. Like suddenly invasive species removal is like the smallest piece of pie in there because we had them so diverted trying to respond to the damages that we had the last 2 years in storms. So we're just starting to kind of climb out of that hole to be able to go back and work. But unfortunately, what that means is a lot of the forward progress that we had made with regard to the invasives is like going the opposite direction. You know, the pro is that we still have the framework and the labor force. We just have to now get back and continue to work, which honestly is probably going to be ongoing forever. So it's just a matter of like getting people to realize what the value is there and like how to make it as light and easy for us to keep going so it's not a major undertaking each time. Next slide. So yeah, like measurable outcomes when we did our final report for CDFW in 2023, it estimated that there was 248 tons of waste removed. We were chipping like a lot of our green waste and then giving it to Harrison for green waste, but then the arundo had to be considered trash. So that was a big portion of what some of that trash was. We've since learned that we could have actually left it on site and it would have been okay. I spent some extensive time working with some folks at UCSB, learning about plants. It's not my background. So yeah, I think there's a lot of money that could have been saved. Kind of some of these niche things about arundo and how you can treat it. But we've seen a huge resurgence of native vegetation, like plants that we had never seen on that property popped up from the seed bank on their own, which was really cool. Our staff is regularly seeing wildlife out there now, which is definitely something that we hadn't experienced before. Anyway, like our project caught so much traction within our department that they ended up giving us like a special commendation award from our director's office of like, yay, a project that was done well. So it felt good to be seen and then also be able to like help our other areas out. Next slide. So for this particular portion of the project, like I said, it's always ongoing, but with the grant funding and what state parks put up as match, we're at like 724,000 and a half. And then, like I said, like I just threw in this picture of these wild rye. You can see the burnt out cottonwoods behind them, but like previously that would have all been arundo as thick as you could see, like the first picture that I had, and we had no giant rye on the property before we started. So this is one of the things we're like, wow, can't believe that's here. So, and then this is another pie chart from our GIS survey of like what the kind of concentration of plant species are that we were dealing with there. Obviously, like almost half was arundo. And then once we got the arundo out of there, mustard became a problem, which we didn't previously have like a mustard issue. So it's fun when you see successions of invasives. But anyway, yeah. Next slide. Did you do any seeding or replanting? Or you just
No, so the person who was in Charlie's role previously was very adamant that the seed bank was there and that natural recruitment would occur, and that's absolutely what happened. So that's great because then we don't have to deal with our own trash 10 years from now, irrigation stuff. In previous projects like legacy irrigation, trash has been a big issue for us. So that was nice. So yeah, like the things that we recommend going forward is the interagency collaboration. Like it was so huge for us to have the partners that we did between the different fire agencies and the county and the city, and even like kind of pulling CDFW with us as a partner in making them engage with us on the terms of our 1600, like was a really big deal. Like instead of being beholden, kind of made them engage and be a part of it. And then I think going forward, it would make a lot of sense instead of taking money like as match and hiring a labor force like we did inside of state parks. It might be worthwhile to look at like contracting a labor force, because then that labor force can't be taken to do other things. And you know, some of these companies that do like contract invasive removal, they kind of have like a pattern that they follow, and it's more of a sure thing, at least as the person who is trying to be like, please stop stealing my staff. I think it would be good to have a contract in place. And then, yeah, can't say enough how much the GIS grid system was, and then naming conventions. It seems really simple, but all of these areas that we're working in, everyone has things like they have different spots that they call different things, like our vernacular. Like we have a Spider-Man's pond. I bet you didn't know that. And so like getting everyone on the same page, and we had just created like a map that had all of these goofy names on it so that people knew like, oh, work area 1, Spider-Man's pond is actually that spot by the train tracks that's got the pickleweed. So like, you know, getting that stuff all documented is a big deal and really helpful. I don't know if that's my last slide or if I'm on. Oh, look at that, it's conclusion. Yeah, so I don't know. I feel like it was good. Obviously, we have a lot of work to do. Like as you drive by on the freeway, you can see the Cape Ivy of the Arundo like still peeking out there. But I think definitely learned a lot of lessons. It's our project.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions?
I have a question about like what was the timeline of, you know, identifying, I guess you said you worked with the city of Ventura, but what other agencies did you work with to help reallocate like people living in the river bottom. And like, what was the timeline of that whole process? It seems like a daunting thing.
Yeah,
in
if
my
you go
eyes.
back to the slide, the only black slide, it has all of the agencies on there.
Oh, okay. let's get
And
back to
our law enforcement, I'm gonna say division, that's not what we actually call them, but it makes sense to say out loud. They actually created a guidance document based off of this model that I'd be happy to share, about how they put this together and the different layers for.
yeah, we can follow up and share that.
Yeah, they have a bunch of different statistics on like when they started, what meetings they held, and then how many individuals they contacted during the period of time. So happy to share that.
You guys did your roundup clearing of the mustard. This 70-acre area extends west from the river. How far? But like beyond.
No, so the 70 acres, I don't remember if I had put an overview picture. Wasn't there? There was one? Katie, are you able to go back to the one that shows the overview of the property? Yeah, so, wait, so the 70 acres is from here to here.
So you guys were east of the river. Sorry.
Yeah, which that's another constraint that I didn't put in is this road washed out. And so we have not been able to get here in a couple of years now.
So that's from the levee west.
Yeah,
from the bike trail levy.
Yeah, so we used to be able to drive down there. We were having dumpsters dropped off. We were able to get a chipper down there. And we lost that ability. So that is pretty much an island right now.
And I can't see if there's a polygon on there or not with the area. How far west?
Oh, it goes all the way to just the edge of the developed area where we have the campground. Our trailheads are here and here. So
Okay.
everything from here that way. You know, this is all like lawn.
As a comment in the chat, we have, some of you know this as you participate in it, but if you haven't, there's the CDFW Cutting the Green Tape program. And the person who put this in the chat wanted to note that since late 2021, CDFW has a habitat restoration permitting program, which is the Cutting the Green Tape program, that intends to partner with practitioners to increase the pace and scale of habitat restoration. It sounds like this project predates this program, and going forward, this sort of project would benefit from permit efficiencies to restoration projects. And then the contact is chat, and his name is Christian Romberger.
Thank you, Christian. We've been following that very closely. Because especially as a sister state agency, it's always fun to tie it up in state regulation. State agency. So yeah, we see a lot of goodness on the horizon with that initiative.
Awesome. And then there's a link for signing up for announcements that I can include in like the email coming after this meeting.
Yeah, when we send the reporting link shared in the chat will be.
Yeah. And then there will be California Natural Resource Agency restoration permitting webinars in early 2025. And there's a plug for Sustainable Conservation's restoration permitting technical guidance, and their website is in the chat, so I'll send that to you as well. Of course. We also, Sustainable Conservation has been helping with the Santa Clara River Ormond Beach projects, and they had a presentation at the last Santa Clara River Watershed Committee meeting. So.
I just want to thank you for what a wonderful project, and it's just really nice to see good news. And I know it was many years in the making, and many, I'm sure, challenges it sounds like, and difficulties that you faced, and it's really nice. So I just want to say I appreciate that. I was wondering how much has there been an increase in like recreation and access now in this area?
Yes.
And like, when do we, like, you know, I think for some of us, we're like, well, when is it safe? Now we can access this area.
Yeah.
We go and see all the amazing work that's done.
So I have this problem where I don't filter the words that come out of my mouth, so I'm like, that's after hours me. But yeah, we've gotten a number of letters of people saying, thank you so much. I previously wouldn't bring my wife here while I was surfing because I was afraid, and now she'll walk on the path while I'm surfing and I'm not worried about it. Have like Boy Scout groups that have been coming for years to camp there that have traditionally erected a fence around their camping area and had security guards, and they don't have to do that anymore. So we had like a really positive feedback from the community about being able to utilize that space and feel comfortable there. So that's really nice. And just the difference between if you went out there just to encounter folks that were, we'll say, living on the fringe like regularly and do not feel comfortable based on your personal preference. But now I would say most of the people you're going to encounter out there are like bird watching or walking their dog. It's nice. It's a good change.
And there are a lot of other state parks.
Yeah, well, like I said, we have that guidance document that our law enforcement guys put together because it is something that we're trying to make applicable to other places. You know, it's really tricky politically because, you know, just because you don't want to have a certain experience for recreation in your park doesn't mean that you can solve a homelessness issue at large in the state. And I don't want to get too political here, but like the climate that we're living in, it's not illegal, nor should it be, to be homeless. And so there's actually not a lot of ground that we stand on in alternatives. And the open space that we have is a large portion of the open space that exists. So yeah, it's a really difficult line to walk.
Any other? Oh, yeah.
The grant that you guys had through 2023, December 2023. So now this is a continued effort, right? You guys are continuing to maintain.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
I see where you're going. So
What now?
yeah, so the grant, we specifically only asked for funding for what we called like the primary vegetation reduction. So the grant was for 90,000. State Parks put up the rest of that 700 and some odd. And the way that we were able to do that was we kept submitting like self-congratulatory letters to to Sacramento of like, look how great we've been doing. And they kept finding little pots of money like, hey, this one is for, you know, invasive treatment. You can have that for your project. And we've kind of secured a fairly safe budgeted segment that covers what our ongoing cost is for this, which is relatively low. So we wanted to make sure that we were doing something sustainable, because in the 90s, like a similar project was conceived. There was an initial push, there was a 5-year monitoring plan, and then nothing, because there wasn't like that sustained funding. So, I mean, I can't retire for 20 years, and I don't want my legacy to be that like I messed it up worse, right? So I wanted some accountability.
Well, you'll have to go back and redo all of this again.
Yeah, you know, and like we have different programs like Ventura Wild. They have kids doing programs out there, and like at least personally as a parent of young children, like it's super important to me that like they can be doing programs like that without us feeling like there's a certain amount of liability.
Yeah. Well, as somebody who has personally done water quality monitoring there, when I worked at the county, and have always with 2 people and having to bring additional and looking over our shoulders and and concern, and now being a parent of a child in Ventura Wild out there. So I personally thank you too. Yeah. Please. So great.
So that effort's going to continue more or less at the same level that you guys have in 2019, 2020.
Well, I mean, I would, to be fair, like from 2019 to 2021, that was like our big initial push. That's when we had the heavy equipment and we had CAL FIRE crews out there.
now I would say we're more in maintenance mode. But yeah, I would say the goal remains the same. We still have the forestry aides on staff. And it's still something like, so basically we were doing 4 days a week with a 6-person crew around the clock out there. I don't think that that's where we're at now. That's a good thing. I think it's definitely more.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thanks for inviting us.
Yeah, thank you so much. All right, so our next meeting will be February 6th. Same time, but maybe we'll try and find a warmer place. We're not sure yet. But thank you guys all for coming. Look out for the recording. We'll have any links that came in through the chat in there. And if your organization does want to share anything that's going to go out soon, just email it to me before I post the recording. Thank you.